Mommy's in the box. She can't breathe. Please. Those 5 words spoken by a 6-year-old girl standing barefoot in the snow, her lips blue, her feet bleeding, stopped a Hell's Angel dead in his tracks on a mountain road in the dead of winter. He had seen war. He had seen death. But he had never seen anything like this child. If this story moves you, hit subscribe right now and follow every word to the end. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The engine on Ryder's 2003 Harley-Davidson Road King had been running rough for the last 6 miles. He could feel it in his hands, that uneven pulse through the handlebars, like the bike was trying to tell him something was wrong before he was ready to hear it. He'd planned to push through to the next town, grab a coffee, maybe find a shop that wouldn't charge him highway robbery just because he wore a leather cut with a patch on his chest that made most people uncomfortable. He hadn't planned on stopping. He hadn't planned on any of it. The road that cut through the lower edge of the Cascade foothills in eastern Washington state was the kind of road that existed mostly on old paper maps, the kind that GPS systems pretended didn't matter anymore. It wound through pine forest and frozen creek beds, and in January at 4:30 in the afternoon, the light was already dying. The temperature had dropped below 18 degrees. The wind off the mountain ridge made it feel like 10. Ryder was 53 years old. He had ridden in weather worse than this. He'd done a run through Montana in a February ice storm in 2009 that had taken 2 fingers on his left hand to mild frostbite. He was not a man easily unsettled by cold. But when his headlight caught something on the shoulder of the road, something small, something pale, something that moved, he felt a cold that had nothing to do with the weather. He pulled the bike over, he cut the engine, and in the sudden silence he heard it, a child crying, quietly, the kind of crying that had already used up all its volume and was running on empty, just breath and shaking, in the soft, desperate sound of someone who had been crying so long they'd almost forgotten why. Ryder swung off the bike. His boots hit the frozen gravel and he moved toward the shape on the shoulder. She was maybe 6 years old. She was barefoot. She was wearing a cotton nightgown, white with small yellow flowers that stopped at her knees. No coat, no socks, nothing between her skin and the frozen ground except the nightgown's thin hem, which had gone gray and stiff at the bottom from the snow and ice she'd been walking through. Her feet. God, her feet. He almost couldn't look at them. The skin was cracked and bleeding, the kind of damage that happens when flesh is exposed to hard cold for a long time. The blood had stained the snow around her in a pattern that turned Ryder's stomach over, like something mechanical grinding to a halt inside him. He dropped to one knee. He tried to keep his voice even. He was a big man, 6'2", 230, with a gray-streaked beard and hands the size of dinner plates, and a face that had been rearranged by time and decisions he'd rather forget. He understood that he was not at first glance the kind of person a terrified child would run to. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm not going to hurt you." She looked up at him. Her eyes were extraordinary. Even then, even in that state, in that cold, with her whole small body shaking like a leaf in a storm drain, her eyes were remarkable. Dark brown, almost black, wide and still in the way that a child's eyes go still. When they have seen something they are still trying to understand. Not blank, not empty, just waiting. She looked at him the way you look at someone when you've been hoping for so long that you've stopped letting yourself believe, and then the thing you hope for actually shows up, and your whole nervous system doesn't know what to do with that information. "Are you real?" she asked. Ryder's throat closed. "Yeah, baby," he managed. "I'm real." She didn't cry harder. She didn't collapse. She just nodded once very slowly, like she was filing that information away somewhere important. Then she said it. "Mommy's in the box. She can't breathe. Please." Damn. Mini climax number 1. Shushum. Ryder's hands moved before his brain caught up with what it was hearing. He had them on her arms, careful, gentle, pulling her toward him, and he was already stripping off his leather cut, already wrapping it around her, already calculating the warmth his body could give versus the warmth she needed, already trying to make his mind work through the thing she had just said. "Mommy's in the box." "What box?" he said. He kept his voice steady. He was good at that. 30 years of riding with men who defaulted to calm had made him the kind of person who went quieter when things got worse. "Can you tell me what box, honey?" "The metal one," she said. Her teeth were chattering badly now that she'd stopped moving. "By the mine." The one Trent put her in. Trent, my stepdad. She said it the way children say things they've rehearsed plainly factually without editorial. Just information, just the truth delivered clean. He locked the door, he has the key. I heard Mommy hit those walls, but then she stopped. Ryder pulled her fully against him, standing wrapping both arms around her small body, feeling how light she was, like she was made of paper in cold air. How long ago, he asked. How long ago did she stop hitting the walls? The girl thought about it. 6-year-olds don't have great internal clocks, and he knew it. But she tried. He could see her trying. I walked a long time, she said finally. It was still dark when I started. It's not dark now, but almost. He did the math. She'd left before dawn. It was closing in on 5 p.m. She had been walking barefoot in the sub-20-degree weather for at least 10 hours. Mini climax number 2. Ryder had his phone out. He was already dialing Bear Marcus Bear Hendricks, chapter president of the Cascade Riders chapter, the man who had his back for 22 years and whose number he knew by heart, even though it was also in his contacts. Bear picked up on the second ring. Yo, I need you to listen to me very carefully and not say anything stupid for approximately 30 seconds, Ryder said. A beat, then go. I'm on route 9-mile marker 41 and approximately. I've got a little girl, maybe 6 barefoot, hypothermia risk feet, are bleeding, been walking since before dawn. She says her mother is locked in a metal container near an abandoned mine somewhere in these hills. Stepfather is the one who did it. Silence, then you're serious. Do I joke, Bear? Where exactly? I don't know exactly. That's the problem. I'm going to need you to get people moving. I'm going to need someone to call 911, and I'm going to need someone to come get this kid somewhere warm while I figure out where the mine is. Can you put go? Already moving, Bear said. The sound in the background shifted. Bear was walking, doors opening, his voice dropping into the register it used when things were real. How's the kid? Ryder looked down at the girl. She had pressed her face against his chest, and he could feel her still shaking, but slower now. She was starting to get some warmth back from his body. Her small hands had found the hem of his flannel shirt and were holding it. Hanging on, he said. Okay, stay with her. Keep her talking. I'm pulling guys together right now. Hawk knows this area, he hunted it for years. 30 minutes. She might not have 30 minutes, Ryder said quietly. Silence again. 20, Bear said. We'll be there in 20. Keep the line open. Chad. Mini climax number 3. Ryder sat down on the gravel shoulder with his back against his bike, keeping the girl Lily. She told him her name was Lily, cradled against his chest. He had one arm fully around her and one hand on his phone and his eyes on the tree line scanning for anything that moved. Because here was the thing that Bear didn't need to know. Yet the thing Ryder's brain had been quietly processing since she said the word stepdad and the word mine. If Trent had put Emily in a metal box near an abandoned mine, there were really only 2 scenarios. Either he'd done it intending to come back, some kind of punishment, some kind of power play, or he hadn't. Either Emily was still a hostage, or she was meant to be found by no one. The silence she'd gone into after hitting the walls told him something he didn't want to say out loud. He looked down at Lily. What's your last name, sweetheart? He asked. Lily Callahan, she said. My mom is Emily Callahan. But Trent makes her use his last name now, Garfield, Emily Garfield. Okay, and Lily, how did you get out? If your mom was in the box, how did you get out? She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up at him, and there it was again, that extraordinary stillness in her eyes. I was never in the box, she said. Trent put Mommy in the box, and then he drove away. But he forgot I was hiding in the back of the truck. Ryder felt something move through him. He forgot you were there. I was under the tarp. Mommy told me to hide under the tarp before he got home. She always told me to hide under the tarp when his truck came back smelling wrong. She paused. When it smells wrong, that means he's been drinking. And when he's been drinking, bad things happen. That sentence spoken so plainly, so matter-of-factly, with the tone of a child relaying established household protocol, hit Ryder somewhere behind his sternum like a closed fist. When it smells wrong, that means he's been drinking. And when he's been drinking, bad things happen. How many times had she said that? How many times had that been the reality of a Tuesday or a Thursday or a random Sunday afternoon scramble for the tarp. Get quiet, Hope. Lily, he said carefully. When Trent drove back out, did he see you? No, she said. He went inside the cabin. I waited until his lights went off. Then I climbed out and I walked. Do you know which direction the mine is from here? She turned and looked up the road with a certainty that surprised him. That way, she said. Up the hill and then you turn where the sign used to be. The sign broke, but the pole is still there. What kind of sign? It said something about silver, she said. Silverton maybe, or Silver Creek. She thought about it. Silver something is. Mini climax number 4. Hawk knew it. When Bear's convoy rolled up 23 minutes later. 4 bikes, Bear's truck, and a prospect named Decker, who was the youngest of them at 28, and had been roused from a hardware store run he'd never get to finish, and Bear relayed what Ryder had told him. Hawk was already off his bike and pulling out his phone. Silver Creek Mine, Hawk said. That's it. It's been decommissioned since the late 90s. It's about 4 miles up this road and then a hard left on a fire road. The road's not maintained. Snow's going to be deep up there. How deep? Bear asked. Deep enough to slow us down, not deep enough to stop us. He looked at Bear. My truck's got the clearance and I know where the mine entrance is. How long to get there? In these conditions, Hawk pulled at his beard, 25-30 minutes. Bear did not react visibly. He was a man who had learned a long time ago that reacting to bad news didn't change bad news. He nodded once. Then we go now. He turned to Decker. You take the girl, get her in my truck, crank the heat, keep her talking. Do not let her get out. Do not let her hear anything she doesn't need to hear. He paused. And call 911 right now. Tell them we have a potential hypothermia victim, adult female location, approximately 4 miles up Route 9 from mile marker 41 Silver Creek Mine. Tell them we need fire and rescue. Decker was already moving. Ryder started to hand Lily over and Lily tightened her grip on his flannel shirt. Are you going to find her? She asked. Her eyes hadn't changed. Still that terrible stillness. Still waiting. Ryder looked at her. He had 3 things he could say. He could say, I'll try. He could say, we're going to do everything we can. He could reach for some version of honesty that was safe and cushioned and meaningless. He said none of those things. Yes, he said. He said it the way he meant it. Lily held his gaze for 1 more second, reading him, evaluating him, doing whatever 6-year-old internal mathematics told her whether an adult was telling the truth or buying time. Then she let go of his shirt. Okay, she said. She let Decker take her to the truck. Major twist 12-minute mark. Hawk was at the wheel of the lead truck, Ryder in the passenger seat, Bear in the back. The convoy was moving. The fire road was exactly as bad as Hawk had predicted, deep ruts filled with crusted snow, tree branches scraping the roof, the kind of terrain that made the truck's chassis moan on every turn. Ryder had Lily's directions burned into his brain. The sign with the pole, the left turn, the mine. But it was Bear who said the thing that changed the shape of everything. Ryder, he said from the back seat. His voice had that particular flatness it got when he was thinking hard and didn't like where his thoughts were going. Hawk, either of you know anything about Trent Garfield? Hawk kept his eyes on the road. Name doesn't ring a bell. It might not be the name he uses out here, Bear said. The other name is Trent Cole. Some people also knew him as T.J. Cole, out of Spokane originally. Silence in the truck. Then Hawk said very quietly, You're talking about the guy they looked at for the Marissa Devlin thing 3 years ago. Same guy, Bear said. Ryder turned in his seat. Someone want to catch me up. Bear leaned forward. Marissa Devlin, 29-year-old woman out of Spokane. She disappeared 3 years ago in January. They found her car by a trailhead in the Okanogan. No body, no explanation. She had a husband went by T.J. Cole. He was looked at hard, couldn't prove anything. He paused. The husband disappeared about 6 months after she did. Popped up a year later in this county. New name, new woman, new life. The truck hit a rut and lurched. No one spoke. Then Ryder said, He's done this before. Bear said nothing. He didn't have to. Mini climax number 5. The mine entrance came up on them faster than Hawk expected. He hit the brakes hard, and the truck slid sideways in the snow before stopping. The headlights swept across the face of the mountain, the timber-reinforced mouth of the mine boarded up and padlocked, and 20 feet to the left of it, half buried in a drift of snow that had been disturbed recently, the blunt, dark shape of a metal shipping container. Standard size, about 20 feet long, the kind of thing you saw on the backs of freight trucks stacked on container ships. Painted dark green, padlocked. The chain on the door was heavy. Bear was already out of the truck. Ryder was right behind him. "Emily," Ryder called out. He was moving toward the container, his boots punching through the snow crust. "Emily Callahan, can you hear me?" Nothing. The silence that came back from that metal box was the worst thing Ryder had heard in 53 years of living. Bear had a bolt cutter from his truck. He always carried one because Bear was the kind of man who believed in being prepared for things other people didn't want to think about. He went at the chain. The cold had made the metal brittle, and after 3 hard cuts the chain gave. Ryder grabbed the handle. He looked at Bear. Bear looked at him. "On 3, Bear said. Mini climax number 6. 1, 3, 2. The door came open on 3. The cold that rolled out of that container was different from the cold of the mountain air. It was the cold of an enclosed space, a dead space, the kind of cold that settles when there is no warmth left to fight it. Ryder stepped inside. It took a second for his eyes to adjust. She was in the far left corner. Emily Callahan, 31 years old, 5'4". Dark hair, wearing a gray sweatshirt and jeans that were soaked through at the knees where she'd been kneeling on the floor of the container. Her wrists had marks on them. She'd been tied at some point and had worked free or had been untied before she was locked in, which somehow felt worse because it meant Trent had thought it through, had decided the lock was enough. She was on her side. She was not moving. Ryder crossed the space in 4 steps and dropped to his knees beside her. He put his fingers to her neck. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Mini climax number 7. Maisha. There. Faint, slow, but there. A pulse. "She's alive," he said. His voice came out strange, rougher than he intended, rougher than he expected. "Bear, she's alive. She needs heat right now, and she needs EMTs. Tell me rescue is close." "ETA is 12 minutes, Bear called from the door. He was already on his phone. "They diverted an ambulance from Colville. They're coming up the fire road. 12 minutes. Ryder was already removing his outer flannel. He'd given Lily his cut, and now this was going too. And he didn't care even slightly. He wrapped it around Emily's upper body. He got his hands under her shoulders and pulled her toward him, trying to get her out of direct contact with the floor of the container. "Emily," he said, firm, not shouting but firm. "The way you talk to someone, you need to pull back from a very long distance. Emily, my name is Ryder. I'm with a friend. Your daughter sent me." "Nothing." "She's okay," he said. "Lily is okay. She walked out of here on her own 2 feet, and she found me on the road, and she told me where you were. She's in a truck right now with the heat running. She's safe." Still nothing. But her eyelids moved. Just barely. Just a flicker. Mini climax number 8. Shabna. "Emily." Ryder leaned closer. "I need you to hear me. Your little girl just walked 10 miles barefoot in the snow to save your life. Now you have to meet her halfway. You have to fight." Her lips parted. The sound she made wasn't a word. It wasn't anything coherent. It was the sound of someone trying to climb back up from somewhere very deep and finding the rungs. "There you are," Ryder said quietly. "There you go. Keep coming." Bear appeared in the doorway. "Hawk is going back down to the road to wave in the ambulance. I've got thermal blankets in the truck. Let me get them." He disappeared. Ryder stayed exactly where he was, one hand on Emily's shoulder, one hand holding his phone to his ear, still on the open line with dispatch relaying her condition. Hypothermia. Possible exposure lasting upward of 12 hours. Conscious but unresponsive. No visible major trauma beyond the bruising at her wrists and the shallow, rapid breathing that told him her core temp had dropped further than he wanted to calculate. He kept talking to her. He talked the way he imagined someone would talk to a person dangling off a ledge, not dramatically, not desperately, but steadily, constantly, giving her something to follow back. "Your daughter is extraordinary," he told her. "You should know that. Whatever you did to raise that little girl, whatever you did right, it worked. She didn't panic. She didn't fall apart. She made a plan, and she executed it, and she found help in the dark, in the worst weather, in the worst conditions. He paused. She told me you always said that when you're in the dark, you look for the light. That's what she did. She looked for the light. Emily's eyes opened. Not all the way, not clearly, but open. And she said one word. Lily. Mini climax number 9. She's safe, Ryder said. I promise you, she's safe. Bear came back with the thermal blankets, and they worked together carefully, getting the layers around Emily's body, keeping her still, keeping her from trying to move on her own before the EMTs arrived. She kept saying the name, Lily, Lily, over and over like a prayer or a location, like if she kept saying it, she could tether herself to the reason to stay. Ryder let her say it. Keep saying it, he told her. That's good. Keep saying it. Outside, distantly, he heard the sound of an engine. Different from their trucks, a larger engine laboring up the fire road. Rescue's here, Bear said. Ryder exhaled something he hadn't realized he'd been holding. In the distance, down the mountain in a truck, with the heat running, and a 28-year-old prospect who had no idea how to talk to a 6-year-old Lily Callahan, sat with her knees pulled to her chest and her eyes fixed on the mountain above her. She had not cried since Ryder had taken her in his arms. She hadn't asked questions she knew nobody could answer yet. She just watched the mountain, waiting for the light to come back down. So, mini climax number 10. When the EMTs moved Emily out of the container and onto the stretcher, she reached out blindly. Her hand found Ryder's forearm and held it with a grip that was impossibly strong for someone who'd nearly frozen to death, the grip of someone who had been holding onto something invisible for 12 hours and hadn't let go yet. Where is she? Emily managed. Her voice was damaged, hoarse, and thin like something wrung out. Where is Lily? In the truck, Ryder said. Down the road. Warm. She tried to push herself up, and the EMT put a hand on her shoulder. Ma'am, you need to stay still. My daughter. The words came out like they'd been cut from something inside her. My daughter, please. Ryder looked at the EMT. The EMT looked at him. A silent conversation conducted in about half a second. We'll bring the truck up, Ryder said. He got on his phone to Decker. Mini climax number 11. When the truck's headlights appeared at the edge of the mine clearing, Ryder was standing 10 feet back from the ambulance, watching the EMTs work, giving them room. Bear was beside him. Neither of them was speaking. The truck door opened. Decker got out first, and then before he could say anything, before he could do the careful, gentle, adult-controlled handoff that he'd probably been planning, Lily was out of the truck. She had Ryder's leather cut still wrapped around her. Her feet were wrapped in the emergency foil blanket Decker had found in the glove compartment. She crossed the distance between the truck and the ambulance in 12 steps, and she did not run exactly. It was more like a controlled urgency. Every step deliberate, her eyes locked on the stretcher. The EMT saw her coming and stepped aside. Lily stopped at the edge of the stretcher. Emily's eyes were open. Barely, but open. Lily reached out and put her small hand on her mother's face. She didn't say anything. Emily turned her head into that touch, and her whole body seemed to change, not medically, not in any way that would show up on a monitor, but visibly. The rigidity in her shoulders dropped. The desperate grip on the stretcher railing loosened. Something terrible unlocked. She lifted one arm slowly, painfully, the arm shaking with the effort, and got it around Lily's shoulders. Lily leaned in. She didn't cry. She'd already cried out whatever she had. She just pressed her face against her mother's collarbone and closed her eyes. Ryder turned away. He looked at Bear. Bear was looking at the ground. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Then Bear said very quietly, so only Ryder could hear, "We still need to find Trent Garfield." Ryder nodded. He looked up the mountain at the empty road at the last light dying on the ridgeline. "Yeah," he said, "we do." Good. Mini climax number 12. End of part 1. Mishant. Inside the ambulance, as the EMTs worked, and Lily sat pressed against her mother's side and refused completely categorically with the quiet stubbornness of a child who has used up every available reserve of compliance to be separated from her, Emily Callahan tried to speak again. The lead EMT leaned in. "Don't try to talk, ma'am." "Phone," Emily said. "My phone. Trent, he took my phone. But I hid." She stopped, swallowed, tried again. "I hid the locket in the corner." Of the box. Her eyes clouded and slow found Ryder, who was standing just outside the ambulance door. The locket has everything he did, to me, and to... She stopped again. To Marissa, Ryder said quietly. Emily went still. She stared at him. You know, she whispered. We figured some of it out, he said. Don't worry about it now. The locket is safe. We'll get it. Her eyes filled with tears that didn't fall. She was too dehydrated, maybe, or too exhausted, or too thoroughly wrung out for them to make it. But they were there. He was going to let them think it was an accident, she said. The snow, the cold. He already had the story. Her voice dropped until it was barely sound. He's done it before, Ryder. He's done it before. Ryder said nothing. He already knew. And outside somewhere on these mountain roads, Trent Garfield, also known as T.J. Cole, also known as the man who had walked away clean from one woman's disappearance and was counting on walking away clean from another, was driving. Probably listening to the radio. Probably already building the version of events that would make him the grieving husband. He didn't know yet that a 6-year-old girl with cracked and bleeding feet had already taken that version apart, piece by piece, step by step, one impossible mile at a time. The ambulance doors closed, and Ryder stood in the cold with nothing but the sound of the engine fading down the fire road and the weight of what Emily had just told him sitting on his chest like a stone. Bear moved first. He pulled out his phone, turned his back to the wind, and dialed. Ryder didn't ask who. He already knew Bear was the kind of man who had contacts in places people didn't like to admit existed, and right now that was exactly what they needed. Hawk came up beside Ryder. You think he's still in the area? I think he went back to the cabin, Ryder said. He put her in the box, and he went back to the cabin to wait. He's going to give it another 12 hours, maybe 24, and then he's going to call someone, a neighbor, a friend, a deputy. He's already softened up, and he's going to say his wife went hiking and didn't come home. He's going to cry the right amount. He's going to have the right details wrong, the way grieving people always get details wrong. He paused. He's done this before. He knows the rhythm of it. Hawk was quiet for a moment. Then he said, so he doesn't know we found her? Not yet. Then we have a window. Narrow one, Ryder said. Once the hospital calls in a report, and they will because this is a mandatory reporting situation, and once law enforcement starts moving, Trent is going to hear something. A scanner, a neighbor's text, a deputy who talks too much at the wrong bar. And then he runs. Bear lowered his phone and turned around. His expression hadn't changed, but his eyes they'd gone to that particular flat darkness they got when something had shifted from a problem into a mission. I've got a location on the cabin. It's registered to a Margaret Elaine Garfield, that's Trent's mother. She died in 2021. He's been living in it since. It's about 7 miles north of here on a county road. He looked at Ryder. Law enforcement response time to that area this time of night. In these road conditions, in this weather, we're looking at 40, maybe 50 minutes from the moment someone calls it in. Ryder said nothing. Bear said nothing. They looked at each other for exactly 3 seconds. We're not vigilantes, Bear said. It came out flat like a disclaimer he was reading aloud because he had to, not because anyone in the conversation believed it fully applied. No, Ryder agreed. We're concerned citizens who received information about a potential ongoing crime and are proceeding to the location to ensure the safety of any individuals who may still be at risk. Hawk made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. That's a lot of words. I went to community college, Ryder said. 2 semesters. Bear was already walking to his truck. The convoy reformed in under 2 minutes. Bear's truck, in the lead, Hawk and Ryder behind him, 2 more bikes bringing up the rear. Decker stayed at the mine entrance with instructions to wait for the sheriff's department and to give them everything: Lily's account, the container, the chain, all of it. He was also told very specifically not to touch the locket that Emily had said was hidden in the corner of the container. The locket that apparently contained evidence of not 1 crime but 2. Ryder thought about that as the convoy moved. He thought about Marissa Devlin, 29 years old, missing 3 years, never found. He thought about a man who had walked away from that and then inside of 3 years had done it again. The same geography, the same winter, the same cold doing the work for him. He thought about what kind of person it took to do something like that twice. And then he stopped thinking about it because thinking about it wasn't useful, and useful was the only thing he had time to be right now. Bear's voice came through on the radio, clipped to Ryder's handlebars. County Road is going to be better maintained than the fire road. We'll make the 7 miles in about 10 minutes. When we get there, nobody moves until I say, we assess first. Copy, Ryder said. And Ryder, yeah. Whatever we find when we get there, we handle it right. Understood. Ryder understood. He understood it completely, and he understood Dookie all the things it meant and all the things it was carefully not saying. Understood. I am on, he said. The bikes moved. The night closed in around them. It took 9 minutes. Bear killed his headlights at the end of the county road driveway, and the rest of them followed. The cabin sat back from the road about 60 yards. Ryder could see the light in the windows from where the convoy had stopped, could see the amber flicker of what looked like a television through a curtain. There was a truck in the driveway, a black F-250 with a dented rear quarter panel and a gun rack visible through the back glass. Trent Garfield was home. He was inside watching television, and while his wife of 2 years was being loaded into an ambulance 7 miles away with her daughter pressed against her side, Bear got out of the truck. He came around to where Ryder was waiting, and he kept his voice low. Okay, here's what we do. We knock on the door. That's it, Hawk said. We knock on the door, Dimona, Bear repeated. We tell him there's been an incident on the fire road involving a woman and a child. We tell him we thought he'd want to know, and we watch his face. Ryder understood that too. A guilty man hearing that his plan has unraveled doesn't react the way an innocent man does. A guilty man, even a careful one, even one who has done this before, has a half second before the mask comes back up. And half a second was enough. They walked to the door, Bear in front, Ryder 1 step behind, Hawk hanging back near the truck. The others stayed with the bikes. Bear knocked. 3 solid knocks. The kind that aren't aggressive, but aren't asking permission either. Inside, the sound of the television died. Footsteps. Then the door opened and Ryder got his first look at Trent Garfield. He was tall, 6'1" maybe, with a lean, ropey build that suggested physical work, or the kind of discipline that comes from wanting to look capable. His face was what people called handsome in a generic way, symmetrical, reasonably proportioned, and entirely unmemorable. The kind of face that witnesses always struggled to describe, which Ryder suspected was not an accident. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans and holding a beer, and he had arranged his features into the expression of a man mildly surprised to find strangers at his door. "Can I help you?" he said. Polite, easy, not a flicker. Bear smiled the way Bear smiled, which was to say with his mouth, but not with anything above it. "Sorry to bother you this late. We're part of a riding club out of Colville. We had a couple guys come off their bikes on the fire road, about 7 miles south of here, bad conditions. One of them spotted a woman and a little girl out there on foot. We just wanted to make sure everyone in the area knew, in case anyone had folks unaccounted for." Trent's expression did exactly what a concerned neighbor's expression should do. It shifted into something attentive and slightly troubled. He tilted his head. He let his eyebrows come together in the middle. He said, "A woman and a little girl out in this weather." "Yeah," Bear said. "Crazy, right? Are they okay? Did someone call?" "Oh, we called it in," Bear said. "Rescue's on the way. Paramedics are out there right now, actually. We just figured this late these roads might be good to check in with folks nearby." He paused. "You live out here year-round?" "Most of the time," Trent said. "Just me and my wife." He paused just the right amount. "My wife actually went out for a walk this afternoon. She's not back yet. I was just about to start worrying." He looked past Bear at Ryder. "What did this woman look like? The one your friends found?" And there it was. Not in his voice was perfect, worried and measured and completely right. Not in his face, the expression held, but in his eyes. Just for a fraction of a second, the kind of fraction that you'd miss if you weren't looking for it, the kind that you'd tell yourself was a trick of the light if you didn't already know what you were looking at. Calculation. Not worry, not fear. Calculation. He was trying to figure out how much they knew. Ryder let Bear handle it. "Dark hair," Bear said. "About your wife's age, maybe. Hard to tell she was in rough shape." Trent's jaw moved. Did she say anything? Did she give a name?" "Paramedics had her by the time our guys got there," Bear said. We didn't get much. Another pause. The little girl, though she was something. 6 years old, maybe, walking by herself on that road in the snow. Brave little thing. Every muscle in Trent Garfield's body went still. It lasted less than a second. Then he was moving smooth, controlled the beer being set on the hallway table, his hand going to his back pocket where his phone was, his body already angling back into the cabin like he was going to grab a jacket, like he was a husband who'd just gotten news about his missing wife and was preparing to go find her. I should get out there, he said. I should. Stay where you are, Ryder said. It came out quiet, completely quiet. But something in it stopped Trent as effectively as a wall. He turned. His eyes found Ryder's. And something moved across his face, something that wasn't fear exactly, but was adjacent to it. The recognition that he had misread the room, that these were not helpful strangers who'd knocked on his door, that the story had already changed shape without him. Excuse me. His voice was still controlled, still trying. Lily told us everything, Ryder said. She's 6 years old and she walked 10 miles barefoot through the snow, and she told us everything. Where the mine is, what the box looks like, what you drove, what time you left. He took one step closer. Your wife is alive, Trent. She's on her way to the hospital right now. And the locket she hid in that container, the one you didn't know about, is in the hands of the sheriff's department. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight to it, that fills a room. Trent stood very still, and then something happened to his face that Ryder would think about later, something that was harder to process than anger would have been harder than aggression. The careful, pleasant, concerned neighbor mask didn't fall off. It dissolved, slowly, like something melting. And what was underneath it wasn't monstrous. It wasn't the face of a man who didn't know what he'd done. It was the face of a man who knew exactly what he'd done and had simply fully believed he would never have to answer for it. Not horror, not remorse, disbelief. He was genuinely, utterly disbelieving that this was happening. She's 6 years old, he said, and his voice for the first time cracked on something real. Not grief, not guilt, incredulity. She's 6 years old. She couldn't have, it's not possible. How? She hid in the back of your truck, Bear said. Under the tarp, the one you forgot to check. Trent's mouth closed. He sat down. Not dramatically, he didn't collapse or reach for something. He just sat down on the hallway stairs like the scaffolding inside him had quietly given way, and he looked at the floor and he said nothing. That was when they heard the sirens. Two of Ryder's guys had made the call from the road, not to 911, but to a contact at the county sheriff's department who knew Bear, who knew the situation, who had agreed to roll out quietly and without fanfare, and who was apparently better at moving quickly than the estimated 40 to 50 minutes had suggested. The first cruiser came up the driveway with its lights on but no siren, which was somehow more serious than a siren would have been. Trent heard it. He looked up from the floor. He looked at Ryder. And in his eyes, behind the disbelief, something else was assembling itself, something older and colder, the part of him that had survived the Marissa Devlin investigation, the part that already knew how to do the next thing. I want a lawyer, he said. Right now, before I say anything to anyone. That's your right, Bear said. And you? He pointed at Ryder. The finger shook very slightly. You broke into my cabin. You entered without... We knocked on your door, Ryder said. You opened it. We're standing in your doorway. We haven't entered anything. He held Trent's gaze. Unlike some people in this conversation. The sheriff's deputy was out of the cruiser and coming up the walk. Bear stepped back to give him access. Ryder moved aside. And Trent Garfield, who had planned everything, who had accounted for the cold and the mine and the story and the timing, sat on his hallway stairs and watched the deputy come through the door and felt the whole architecture of his plan coming apart around him. Because of a 6-year-old girl. Because of a tarp he hadn't checked. The deputy's name was Ortega, broad-shouldered, mid-40s, the kind of calm that came from years of not letting people see him rattled. He looked at Trent. He looked at Bear. He looked at Ryder. We got a call, he said. Female victim, Silver Creek mine hypothermia, suspected foul play. He looked back at Trent. Sir, I'm going to need you to stand up and put your hands where I can see them. Trent stood. He put his hands up. He did it with a kind of mechanical compliance, like a man running a procedure he'd rehearsed. Is there anyone else in the home? Ortega asked. No, Trent said. It's just me. Any weapons on your person? No. Any weapons in the home? There's a rifle, gun cabinet, locked. Ortega nodded. He reached for his cuffs. Standard procedure, he said, and Trent didn't argue, which surprised nobody in that hallway. He'd made his calculation. The lawyer request was the first wall he was going to get behind, and he was already behind it, and everything he did between now and a formal interrogation was going to be considered and strategic. He knew this game. He'd played it before. But here was the thing about the game, and Ryder watched Ortega lead Trent out the door and understood it with a clarity that settled into his bones. Trent had played it before without the locket, without Lily, without Emily alive and talking and on her way to a hospital with a medical record that was going to tell an extremely detailed story about what had been done to her body over not days but months. The locket changed everything. Ryder didn't know what was on it yet. Emily had said it had everything Trent had done to her and everything he'd done to Marissa Devlin 3 years ago. He didn't know if that meant photographs or recordings or something Emily had written and stored or something else entirely. But Trent knew what was on it, and as the deputy walked him past Ryder toward the cruiser, Trent turned his head just slightly, just enough, and looked at Ryder with an expression that was no longer calculated, no longer masked, no longer anything but raw. She was supposed to be asleep, Trent said. His voice was almost conversational. Almost. Lily, she was supposed to be asleep. I checked on her at 9:30. She was in bed. She was under the tarp by 9:15. Ryder said. Trent closed his eyes for 1 second. Then Ortega guided him into the back of the cruiser and closed the door. Bear came up beside Ryder on the driveway. Both of them watched the cruiser's brake lights at the end of the driveway. He's going to lawyer up hard and fast, Bear said. Yeah. Might walk on a technicality or two. Defense is going to go after the chain of custody on the locket. Go after our presence here. Go after all of it. Maybe, Ryder said. You're not worried about that. Ryder was quiet for a moment. The cold was real around them. The night had dropped another 3 or 4 degrees while they had been inside, and his breath was visible in the air, steady and slow. Emily's alive, he said finally. Lily's safe. The man is in the back of a cruiser, and the evidence exists. He paused. The rest of it is for lawyers and prosecutors and people who get paid to worry about it. That's not my lane. Bear made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been something more complicated than that. You know what gets me, Hawk said from behind them. Neither of them had heard him come up. He said she was supposed to be asleep. He's standing there just arrested going into a police car, and the thing that's eating him isn't that he's caught. It's that he miscounted. It's that he made a logistical error. Nobody answered that because there wasn't an answer to it exactly. There was only the fact of it that a man who had looked at his 6-year-old stepdaughter sleeping and made a calculation about whether she was a problem or a non-factor had simply gotten the calculation wrong. That he had treated the presence of a child like a variable in an equation, and the child had turned out to be something his equation couldn't contain. Ryder's phone buzzed. He looked at it. It was Decker texting from the mine. Deputies here found the locket. It's not just photos. It's audio, multiple recordings. Sheriff's deputy said they were going to need to keep us for statements, but he's not holding us. You should know one of the recordings is dated 3 years ago. January 14th, Ryder stared at the text. January 14th, 3 years ago, Marissa Devlin had been reported missing on January 16th. He showed the phone to Bear without a word. Bear read it. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said quietly, she knew. Emily knew what he did to Marissa, and she recorded him talking about it, and she hid the evidence in a locket in case she never made it out. She was preparing for the worst, Ryder said. Even before tonight, she'd been preparing. Hawk said. They stood in the cold. Somewhere 7 miles south of them, Emily Callahan was in an ambulance slowly coming back from the edge. Her daughter was with her, or as close as the EMTs would allow. Probably still not crying, probably still watching her mother's face with those extraordinary still eyes. And in a county jail intake room, Trent Garfield was about to discover that the woman he had locked in a metal box had spent months quietly, carefully, secretly building the case against him, had documented, had recorded, had hidden the evidence in a locket she'd worn around her neck, the last thing she'd managed to do before he locked the door. She had not planned to survive. She had planned that if she didn't survive, it would not be for nothing. That thought moved through Ryder like something with heat in it. He stood in the cold on a mountain driveway in January, with the sound of a police cruiser moving down the county road fading into the night, and he felt it, the specific, particular courage of a woman who had been afraid for a long time and had decided to be afraid while doing something anyway. His phone buzzed again. It was a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer it, but something made him pick up. "This is Ryder," he said, a woman's voice, quiet, careful. "Is this the man who found Emily and Lily tonight?" He went still. "Who's calling?" A beat. "My name is Sandra Devlin," the woman said. "Marissa was my daughter." Ryder didn't move. He stood in the cold on that driveway with the phone pressed to his ear and the sound of Bear and Hawk going to quiet behind him because they could see from his face that something had shifted. "Mrs. Devlin," he said carefully, "how did you get this number?" "The deputy," she said, "Ortega. He called me about an hour ago. He told me there'd been an incident. He told me a woman had been found. He told me there might be recordings." Her voice was steady in the way that voices get steady when someone has been crying for so long that they've gone past crying into something harder and quieter on the other side. "He wouldn't tell me what was on them. He said he couldn't, but he gave me your number. He said you were the one who found her." "I found Emily," Ryder said. "Yes." "Was it him?" she asked. "Was it Trent Cole? Was it the same man?" Ryder closed his eyes for 1 second. This was not a question he could answer with legal precision. He was not a detective, not a prosecutor, not anyone who had the authority to tell a grieving mother that the man who had taken her daughter was sitting in the back of a police cruiser 7 miles away. He knew what he knew. He knew what Decker's text had said. He knew what the date on that recording meant. But he also knew what it felt like to be on the other end of the kind of silence that says, "We're not sure yet," when the person on the other end of the line has been living in not sure yet for 3 years. "Mrs. Devlin," he said, "I think you should come to Colville General Hospital. Emily Callahan is being treated there tonight. I think there are things she's going to need to tell someone, and I think you may be the right person to hear them." He paused. "Can you get there?" A silence, then, "I've been packed for 3 years," Sandra Devlin said. "I never stopped being packed." She hung up. Ryder lowered the phone. Bear was watching him. Hawk was watching him. He told them what she'd said, and all of it quickly without editorializing. And when he was done, Bear let out a long, slow breath that turned to vapor in the cold air. "This thing is bigger than tonight," Bear said. "Always was," Ryder said. He was already walking back to his bike. The ride to Colville General took 22 minutes in the dark on roads that were solid ice in the low spots and packed snow everywhere else. And Ryder used every one of those minutes to organize what he knew against what he didn't. Emily was alive. That was the foundation, the irreducible fact that everything else was built on. Trent was in custody. The locket was in evidence. The recordings existed, and one of them predated Marissa Devlin's disappearance by 2 days. What Ryder didn't know, what no one outside of a few deputies in a hospital room knew yet, was what was actually on those recordings. What Emily had managed to capture, what she'd heard, what she documented in secret, carrying it around her neck, waiting for the moment it would either save her or save someone after her. He thought about that, the weight of it, wearing something like that every day, a small gold locket that looked like jewelry and was actually evidence, going to sleep with it. Waking up with it, sitting across the dinner table from a man who had killed before and would kill again, and who did not know that his wife had been quietly, methodically building the case against him. That took a particular kind of courage that Ryder didn't have a word for. He pulled into the hospital lot and killed the engine. Bear's truck came in right behind him. The emergency department was lit up and busy. It always was on cold winter nights when black ice and bad decisions and 2 long gaps between people checking on their elderly neighbors all converged. Ryder went to the desk and gave Emily's name and was told politely but firmly that he was not family and therefore not permitted to information about her condition. He was about to argue, not aggressively, but with the particular kind of reasonable persistence that he'd found opened more doors than volume did, when a voice behind him said, "He's with me." He turned. Deputy Ortega was standing 5 feet away, in plain clothes, off-duty apparently, or at least off-uniform, with a paper cup of hospital coffee in each hand, and the expression of a man who had decided sometime in the last 2 hours that this night was going to require him to operate slightly outside his usual boundaries. He held out one of the coffees to Ryder. Ryder took it. "She's stable," Ortega said, keeping his voice low. "Core temperature is back in the safe range. She's got frostbite damage on her feet and hands moderate. They think she'll keep all her fingers and toes, and she's dehydrated, malnourished, beyond what a few bad days would explain, and she's got 6 weeks of bruising on her ribs that the ER doc flagged immediately." He let that last part land. 6 weeks, Ryder. This wasn't one night. Ryder's hand tightened around the paper cup. "She's been talking," Ortega continued, "on and off. She's not all the way lucid yet. The hypothermia does something to short-term recall, makes it fragmentary. But what she's said has been consistent, and it's been detailed, and it is not the account of someone making things up." He paused. "And the locket my sergeant called me 20 minutes ago. They've pulled the audio files, 7 recordings, spanning 14 months. 14 months, Bear said from behind Ryder. He'd come in quietly. Ortega glanced at him but didn't object to his presence. 14 months, Ortega confirmed. She recorded him. Arguments, confessions, once apparently a full conversation in which Trent describes in detail what happened to Marissa Devlin. He stopped. He looked at the floor for a moment, the way cops look at the floor when they need a second. She's been carrying that around her neck for over a year. She knew. She knew everything, and she documented everything, and she stayed because she had nowhere to go, and because, he stopped again. Because she had Lily, Ryder said. Because she had Lily. Ortega agreed. She told one of the nurses, this is maybe an hour ago, she was still pretty out of it. She told her that she tried to leave twice. Both times Trent told her he would take Lily, that he had documentation to show she was an unfit mother, things he'd staged, things he'd set up over months. She believed him. He had done enough to make her believe him. The hallway around them was ordinary and fluorescent and completely indifferent to what was being said inside it. Somewhere down the corridor, a child was crying about something minor. 2 nurses were arguing over a schedule. The PA system called a name. Ryder thought about Emily Callahan sitting across a dinner table from a man who had already killed once, eating food, answering questions, hiding a recording device in a locket while Lily slept down the hall, making a calculation every single day about whether today was the day she could get out, and every single day deciding that the risk to Lily was too high. He thought about what it cost to make that decision over and over for 14 months. Where's Lily now? He asked. Social worker is with her, Ortega said. They're letting her stay in Emily's room as long as Emily is stable, which the doctor said she is. The social worker is good. She's worked with kids in trauma situations before. Lily is not talking much, but she's eating, which the doctor said is actually a better sign. She wouldn't let them separate them, Bear said. It wasn't a question. Correct, Ortega said. They tried, gently. She sat down on the floor outside the room and crossed her arms and did not move. They decided not to push it. Something in Ryder's chest shifted. He almost smiled. I need you to know something, Ortega said. He turned to face Ryder fully and his voice dropped lower. What you did tonight, what your guys did, it's going to get complicated. Defense attorney is going to look hard at your presence at the cabin. The fact that you got there before law enforcement. The fact that you spoke to Trent before he was Mirandized. We knocked on his door, Ryder said. He opened it voluntarily. We stood in the doorway. We identified ourselves as a riding club. Nothing we said was coercive or deceptive in any way that... I know, Ortega said. I know, I'm not worried about you. I'm telling you because the road ahead of this case is not going to be smooth, and I want you to understand that from the front end. He paused. What you did tonight, finding that woman, getting that child somewhere safe, making sure the evidence was preserved, that was the right thing. The right thing doesn't always make the legal thing easier. I just want you to be clear-eyed about that. Ryder nodded once. I'm going to need formal statements from everyone who was at the cabin, Ortega said. Tonight or tomorrow morning at the latest. Can you make that happen? Yes, Bear said. Ortega nodded. He finished his coffee. He was about to walk away when Ryder said, one more thing. Ortega stopped. Sandra Devlin, Ryder said. Marissa's mother. She called me. I told her to come to the hospital. Ortega's expression moved through several things quickly. Surprise, then calculation, then something that looked like relief, which wasn't the reaction Ryder had expected. Good, Ortega said quietly. That's actually good, because there's something on those recordings that she's going to need to hear from a person, not a detective in an interview room. And Emily Callahan, once she's more lucid, Emily is going to need to give that to her herself. He looked at Ryder. I couldn't have made that call, but you could, and you did. He walked away. Bear exhaled. This deputy is not what I expected. People surprise you, Ryder said. He found a chair in the waiting area and sat down. Bear sat beside him. Hawk had stayed outside with the bikes. Someone always stayed with the bikes, and the rest of the guys had gone to a diner down the road to wait, because a waiting room full of bikers was not going to help anyone's blood pressure tonight. It was 11:47 p.m. The night had started from Ryder's perspective at 4:22 when his headlight had caught something small and pale on the shoulder of Route 9. 7 hours. In 7 hours, the entire architecture of a man's carefully constructed double life had come apart because a child had hidden under a tarp. He sat with that. He was still sitting with it when the waiting room doors opened at 12:19 a.m. and a woman walked in who he knew immediately, not because he'd seen her before, but because of the way she moved. She was maybe 60, with white hair cut short and the particular posture of someone who has been bracing for a long time and has gotten so good at it they no longer notice they're doing it. She was carrying a coat that she'd apparently forgotten to put on, just holding it folded over one arm as if she'd picked it up and then something had interrupted the process. She scanned the room. Her eyes found Ryder the way eyes find the thing they were looking for when they've been looking for a very long time. She crossed the room. She sat in the chair across from him. She put the coat on her lap. You're Ryder, she said. Yes, ma'am. Sandra Devlin. She held out her hand. He shook it. Her grip was firm, and her hand was cold from the outside. Tell me what you know, she said. All of it, not the soft version. He told her. He started from the moment he'd seen Lily on the road, and he took Sandra Devlin through all of it. Lily's words, the mine, the container. Emily's condition, the locket, the recording dated 2 days before Marissa disappeared. He gave her the facts in the order they'd happened, and he did not smooth anything over or soften any edges, because she had asked for the real version, and she deserved the real version, and he could see from her face that she'd been given too many soft versions over 3 years and was finished with them. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. She was looking at the floor, her hands folded on top of the coat in her lap, absolutely still. He told the investigators she'd left him, Sandra said finally. He said she'd been unhappy for months, that she had a drinking problem, that she'd talked about starting over somewhere new. She paused. Marissa didn't drink. She never drank. She watched her father drink himself out of our family when she was 12, and she swore she'd never touch it. The investigators wrote it down anyway. Another pause. He had text messages from her phone saying goodbye. Ryder said nothing. He sent them himself, Sandra said. It wasn't a question. That would be consistent with what Emily recorded, Ryder said carefully. Sandra nodded, very slowly. My daughter has been in the ground somewhere in these mountains for 3 years, she said. And this man has been up here the whole time in a cabin with a new woman and a new name and a new story. She lifted her eyes. They were dry. I used to pray that she was just gone, that she'd left and started over and was somewhere I couldn't find her alive and okay, just done with us. I used to pray for that because it was better than the other thing. Mrs. Devlin. Don't, she said, gently but firmly. Don't do the thing where you tell me you're sorry. You went out on a mountain road at 4 a.m. in January and you saved a woman's life. You don't get to be sorry. You get to be the person who did that, and that's something. Her voice caught just once, just briefly, and then steadied. I'm not going to fall apart in front of you. I'm too old for that. I've done my falling apart in private. She straightened. I want to talk to Emily Callahan. When she's ready, I want to hear what my daughter's voice sounded like on those recordings, even in a courtroom, even through a speaker. I want whoever put her in the ground to spend the rest of his life knowing that her voice was the thing that put him there. Her jaw set. Can you make any of that happen? I'm a motorcycle mechanic from Colville, Ryder said. I can't make the legal part happen. But, but Ortega can, and I think Ortega is the kind of cop who will. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded again, and this time there was something different in it. Not resolution, not relief, but the very specific look of it who has been waiting for years for something to stop being shapeless and has finally found the shape of it. All right, she said, then we wait. They waited. At 1:47 a.m. a nurse appeared in the waiting room door and spoke to the desk, and the desk looked at Ryder and said something, and Ryder stood. Bear stood with him. Room 114, the desk nurse said. She's asking for you, the woman Emily. She's asking for the man on the motorcycle. Sandra Devlin was already on her feet. Ryder looked at her. I'll go first, he said. Give her a minute. She doesn't know you're here yet. Sandra sat back down. She understood. Room 114 was at the end of a corridor that Ryder walked alone. He could hear his boots on the linoleum. He could see the light under the door. He knocked. Come in, said a voice that was still thin but no longer fragile. He opened the door. Emily Callahan was sitting up. Not all the way, she was propped against the pillow at about 45 degrees with an IV in her left arm and heat packs on both hands and a blanket pulled to her collarbone, but sitting up, which was more than he'd dared to calculate when he'd held her in that container and felt how barely there she was. Her color was better. Her eyes were clear. Lily was asleep in the chair beside the bed, curled into a shape that only children can make her head, on her own knee, breathing slowly. Someone had found her a pair of socks, thick wool ones, hospital issue, comically large on her small feet, and wrapped her in a second blanket. She looked younger asleep. She looked for the first time since Ryder had found her like a child. Emily's eyes went to him immediately. She looked at him the way you look at someone who owes you nothing and came anyway. You're Ryder, she said. Yes. Lily told me you were big, she said. She said you sounded like a bear, but you were soft. Ryder blinked. She's 6, Emily said, and the corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but the component parts of one. Tact is not a priority yet. He sat in the chair on the other side of the bed, the one that wasn't occupied by a sleeping child. How are you feeling? Like I was in a metal box for 12 hours in January, she said, which I was. She paused. They told me he was arrested. Yes. They told me they have the locket. Yes. She looked down at her hands wrapped in the heat packs, looking nothing like hands at the moment. I didn't know if it would be enough, she said quietly. I didn't know if the recordings were clear enough. I didn't know if anyone would even look for it. I hid it in the corner, and I thought at least someone would know, even if they couldn't prove anything. At least someone would know it wasn't an accident. It's going to be more than enough, Ryder said. And it wasn't an accident, and everyone is going to know. She was quiet for a moment. He told me once, she said carefully, the way you say something you've been querying, that I was too smart to be useful. He said smart women were just women who hadn't been taught their place yet. She looked up. I started recording him the next day. Ryder held her gaze. Good, he said. She nodded. Then there's something else. On the recordings. She said it the way someone says something they've been waiting to say. Not the way of relief, but the way of readiness, like a weight she's been holding at arm's length for a long time and is finally ready to set down in the right hands. The night he told me about Marissa, he wasn't confessing. He thought he was warning me. He thought he was telling me what happened to women who tried to leave him. She paused. He told me where she is. The room went very still. Lily breathed in and out in her chair. He told me the location, Emily said. In the recording, he said it like a reminder, like a fact he wanted me to carry. I don't think he understood that I was already recording. I don't think he thought I was capable of it. Her voice was perfectly even. She's in the mountains, about 4 miles east of the mine. There's a place he called the quarry shelf. He said it was 100 feet down and nobody would ever go looking because nobody knew to look. Ryder looked at her. She looked back at him. Her mother deserves to bring her home, Emily said. Whatever is left, she deserves that. Ryder exhaled very slowly. Her mother is in the waiting room, he said. Emily's face changed. Every carefully maintained steadiness in it dropped, and what was underneath was not weakness, it was grief. Pure, uncomplicated grief for a woman she'd never met, whose death she'd carried as her own secret for over a year. whose voice she'd heard only in a man's cruel retelling. "She's here," Emily whispered. "She drove as soon as she heard," Ryder said. "She's been waiting." Emily looked at the door. Then she looked at Lily, sleeping soft, safe, her two big socks and her borrowed blanket and her small chest rising and falling with the absolute trust of a child who has decided that the danger is over. "Send her in," Emily said. "Please." He walked back down the corridor. Sandra Devlin was standing before he reached the waiting room, already on her feet, already reading his face the way mothers read faces when they have trained themselves to look for the truth underneath whatever expression is being offered to them. "She wants to see you," Ryder said. Sandra pressed her lips together. She picked up her coat. She straightened. "Does she know about the recording? About where Marissa is?" "She'll tell you herself," Ryder said. "It's hers to tell." Sandra nodded. She walked past him down the corridor toward room 114, her coat over her arm, her back straight, her footsteps quiet and deliberate. Ryder watched her go. He watched her stop at the door. He watched her knock once, very gently. He heard Emily's voice from inside say, "Come in," and he watched Sandra Devlin open the door and step through. The door closed. Bear was at his elbow. "How bad is it going to get for Trent in there?" he said quietly, meaning the legal battle, meaning the defense attorneys, meaning all of it. "As bad as it can get," Ryder said. Emily kept him talking for 14 months without him knowing. Whatever he thought he was doing, however careful he thought he was being, she was more careful. "The recordings are going to bury him." He paused. "And Marissa deserves to come home." Bear was quiet. Then, "What happens to Emily and Lily after all this?" It was the right question. It was the question Ryder had been turning over since the ambulance had driven away from the mine. What happened after the immediate crisis, after the adrenaline, after the arrest? Emily had no family mentioned. She'd been isolated by design. Trent had spent months making sure of it. She had a 6-year-old daughter with cracked feet and an internal composure that no child should need to have, and she was going to walk out of this hospital into a life that had been systematically dismantled around her. "That's not a tonight problem," Ryder said. "Tonight she's warm, Lily's safe. That's the whole job tonight." He paused. "Tomorrow is a different problem." "Okay," Bear said. They sat back down. At 2:51 a.m., the door to room 114 opened and Sandra Devlin came out. She walked back down the corridor. She walked all the way to where Ryder was sitting, and she sat down in the chair across from him again, and she put her coat on her lap, and she was crying quietly, completely, without self-consciousness, the way people cry when they've stopped caring who sees it, because what they're carrying is simply too large for privacy. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "She held my hand." Ryder didn't respond. "Emily held my hand the whole time she talked," Sandra said. "She never let go." She looked at him. "She's been carrying Marissa for 14 months. She carried her in that locket around her neck every single day, knowing what was in it." Her voice broke on the last word and rebuilt itself. "She said she was sorry, that she was sorry she couldn't get out sooner, that she was sorry it took so long." She shook her head. "She has nothing to be sorry for. I told her that. I told her she gave me everything I've needed for 3 years." Ryder said nothing. Sometimes nothing was the right thing. "She's going to be okay," Sandra said. "Emily, she's going to be okay. You can tell, you can see it. Even tonight, even like this, she's still in there completely." A pause. "And that little girl," she exhaled, "that extraordinary little girl." The words hung in the air of the hospital waiting room, and Ryder let them stay there. He thought about Lily standing on the road in the dark. He thought about the blood in the snow. He thought about the way she'd said, "Are you real?" And the way he'd said, "Yeah, baby, I'm real." And the way she'd filed it away like something she'd needed confirmed before she could move on to the next thing. He thought about what it meant that a 6-year-old had done what armies of adults couldn't. And then he stopped thinking about it and just sat in the quiet and let the night be what it was, terrible and true and somehow, against all reasonable odds, not finished in darkness. Sandra Devlin left the hospital at 3:40 a.m. She didn't leave alone. Ortega had arranged for a victim's advocate from the county office to drive her to a motel in Colville, a woman named Patrice, who spoke in the low, unhurried tones of someone who had done this particular kind of accompanying many times before. Ryder watched them go from the hospital entrance, and when their car turned out of the lot and the taillights disappeared, He felt the specific exhaustion of a man who has been running on adrenaline for 11 hours and has just run out. Bear was beside him. You need to sleep. I need coffee, Ryder said. You need both, in that order. They went to the diner. It was 3 blocks from the hospital, a place called Tilly's, that had been open 24 hours since 1987 and smelled like everything a 24-hour diner should smell like. And the woman behind the counter looked at 4 bikers coming through the door at 4 in the morning with the complete absence of surprise that comes from having seen everything. She poured coffee without being asked. She put a basket of biscuits on the table. She left them alone. Ryder wrapped both hands around the mug. Hawk said, "What happens to the cab and Emily's stuff is in there." "Evidence," Bear said. "They'll go through it first. Could be weeks before she gets anything back." "She's got nothing then," Hawk said. "She walks out of that hospital with a 6-year-old, and she's got the clothes on her back, if that." Nobody argued with that assessment because it was accurate and because accuracy was the first thing you needed before you could solve anything. "She'll need a place to land," Ryder said. "The chapter has the emergency fund," Bear said. He said it quietly, matter-of-factly, like it was obvious, which to him it was. The Cascade Writers Chapter Emergency Fund had been built over years, charity runs, fundraisers, the quarterly percentage that every member contributed without discussion. It existed for exactly the kind of situation that nobody ever wanted to need it for. It's not unlimited, but it's enough to get her into an apartment, first and last month, basic furniture. "She's going to need more than that," Ryder said. "She's going to need legal help. She's going to be a witness in a murder trial, probably 2 of them, when they get around to charging him for Marissa. She's going to need someone who knows how to navigate that with her." "Patrice," Hawk said. Everyone looked at him. "The victim's advocate. That's literally her job. She knows the resources." "Right," Ryder said. He drank his coffee. He thought about Emily in room 114. He thought about what she'd said, that Trent had told her she was too smart to be useful, and that she'd started recording him the very next day. He turned that over. 14 months of recordings. 14 months of sitting across the table from a man who had put his first wife in the ground and was patient enough to wait for the right moment to do it again. And Emily had sat there and eaten dinner and answered questions and played the role he'd assigned her while building the architecture of his destruction, one conversation at a time. She hadn't done it out of revenge. He understood that now. She'd done it out of the same impulse that had made Lily hide under the tarp, the understanding, bone-deep and clear-eyed, that survival required preparation, that you had to build your escape before you could use it, that the door had to exist before you could walk through it. Both of them, mother and daughter, operating on the same instincts separately without coordinating because they'd both learned it from the same place, from living in a house where the wrong move at the wrong moment had consequences. "Ryder." Bear's voice had a quality. He recognized the tone it used when it was delivering information he was not going to enjoy. "I got a text while you were in with Emily, from Decker." Ryder looked up. "The sheriff's department found something in the cabin," Bear said, "after Trent was taken in. They did the initial walkthrough while we were still there, standard procedure. They wanted to document the scene before anything could be disturbed." He paused. "In the back bedroom, behind a panel in the closet wall, there was a box." "What kind of box?" "The kind that has a lock on it," Bear said. "They got it open. Inside documents, identification documents, 3 full sets of them. Different names, different photos, all of them. Trent, all of them usable. Passports, driver's licenses, social security cards." He set his phone on the table so Ryder could see the text. He was ready to run. Anytime he needed to, any day, any hour, he had everything he needed to become someone else and disappear. Ryder stared at the phone. "He wasn't planning to stay after Emily died," Hawk said slowly. "He wasn't planning to play the grieving husband this time. He was going to disappear." "Which means," Ryder said, "that something changed. Something in the last few months made him decide to accelerate. He stopped building the story and went straight to the exit." Bear picked up his phone. "Ortega is going to figure that out," he said. "That's his job now. Our job is done." He said it with finality. Not unkindly, but fully the way Bear said things when he'd made a decision about where a line was. Ryder knew he was right, He also knew he wasn't going to sleep until he understood why Trent had moved when he moved. He texted Ortega, simple and direct, when you have a minute. What made him move now? The fake IDs suggest he was accelerating. Something triggered it. He put the phone on the table. The biscuits were good. He ate 2 of them and drank a second cup of coffee and let his body have the 20 minutes of stillness it had been asking for since approximately 6 p.m. His phone buzzed at 4:37 a.m. Ortega, not a call. Come to the station when you can. There's something you need to see in person. Bear read the text over his shoulder. He didn't say anything. Ryder left money on the table enough to cover all 4 of them, plus a tip that was probably excessive but felt proportionate to the biscuits and the not being asked any questions, and they drove to the sheriff's station. Ortega was waiting in the lobby. He was wearing the same clothes he'd had on at the hospital, which confirmed that he had also not slept, and he had the focused, slightly too alert look of a man running on coffee and the particular stimulus of a case that keeps opening new rooms every time you think you've seen the whole building. He took Ryder into a conference room. Just Ryder Bear waited in the lobby without being asked because Bear understood instinctively when a room had a maximum capacity for useful people. Ortega closed the door. On the table was a laptop open, and beside the laptop in an evidence bag was a phone cracked across the back, the case peeling at the corners, the kind of phone that had been used hard for a long time. Emily's phone, Ortega said. We recovered it from the cabin. He'd taken it from her 3 days ago. She told us that from the hospital. Said he'd taken it and told her he was having it looked at because it was acting strange. She knew what that meant. She'd been careful. She didn't think there was anything on it he could use, but she was scared. He was checking her phone, Ryder said. He suspected something. More than suspected, Ortega said. He turned the laptop to face Ryder. On the screen was an email chain pulled from a cloud backup of Emily's phone, time-stamped and unambiguous. 3 weeks ago, Emily made contact with a domestic violence organization out of Spokane. She was using a library computer. She'd told Trent she was running errands. She emailed them under a different name. She was asking about emergency relocation resources, about how to get a child out of a situation without triggering a custody alert. He paused. They responded. She responded back. Over 3 weeks, there were 11 emails. Ryder was reading the chain on the screen. He read fast. His eyes moved down the page. Trent found these, Ortega said. Ryder stopped reading. On her phone, not on her phone, she'd deleted them from the phone, but he found the library login. He went to the library. The head librarian confirmed it yesterday after we called. He came in 4 days ago, said he was trying to help his wife recover some documents she'd accidentally deleted. The librarian told him she couldn't give access to another person's account. He left. Ortega paused, but not before he sat down at a public terminal and found the email address Emily had used. He couldn't get into the account. It was password protected, but he got the address. And from the address, he figured out enough. He knew she was trying to leave, Ryder said. He knew she was trying to leave, Ortega confirmed. And that is when the timeline shifted. Everything before that, the isolation, the documentation he was building against her, the fake IDs, the contingency plans, and all of it was slow and patient. Long game. After that library visit, everything compressed. He moved on her within 72 hours. Ryder sat back. The shape of it assembled itself completely in his mind. 14 months of patience, of control, of careful long game management, and then 3 weeks ago, a crack. A library computer, an email address. A woman who had done everything right for 14 months had made one small move toward the exit, and he'd seen it, and his patience had ended. If she'd waited 1 more week, Ryder said, if the relocation organization had been able to move faster, she'd have been gone, Ortega said quietly. Her and Lily both. He'd have come home to an empty house. He let that sit for a moment. Instead, he found the crack and he closed it. He took her phone. He watched her for 3 days, and then he made his move. The box was always the plan, Ryder said. He had it ready. The shipping container, he'd had it at the mine for how long? 1.5 years, Ortega said. We found the purchase records. He bought it 14 months ago, same month Emily started recording him. The air in the room changed. Ryder felt it change. He bought it the same month she started recording, Ryder said slowly. Yes. So he was planning to use it. He just wasn't sure when. Ryder stared at the laptop. He was living in a house where two people were simultaneously preparing to destroy each other. Emily recording him, Trent building a container, neither one knowing how much the other knew. Except Emily knew what he'd done to Marissa, Ortega said, and Trent thought Emily didn't know anything at all. He underestimated her from the beginning, Ryder said. Right from the first day. It's what he does, Ortega said. It's the pattern. He finds women he thinks he can contain. Women with children, women with limited support systems, women who have already been through something that's made them question their own judgment. He looks for the ones he thinks are manageable. He paused. He was wrong about Emily the same way he was probably wrong about Marissa. Ryder thought about Marissa Devlin, 29 years old, 3 years in the ground on a mountain shelf her mother packed and ready for a drive she'd been waiting 3 years to make. He thought about what kind of woman Marissa had been. He didn't know. He'd never know, not really. But he knew the shape of what Trent had done to her and the shape of what he'd tried to do to Emily, and he knew that the word manageable was the most monstrous word he'd heard all night, more monstrous than anything Trent had said on any recording. Because it said everything about how Trent saw people, not as people, as variables, as problems with solutions. His phone buzzed. He looked at it, expecting Bear. It was a number he didn't recognize. The same number Sandra Devlin had called from. He picked up. Ryder, Sandra's voice steadier than it had been at the hospital. She'd slept maybe, or had the kind of conversation with a victim's advocate that reorganized the pieces into something more navigable. I'm sorry to call so early. Don't be, he said. I spoke with Patrice this morning at length. A pause. She told me something I think you need to know. About Trent's defense attorney. He was hired last night. Apparently, Trent made one phone call from the intake room, and it wasn't to a public defender. Ryder waited in. His name is Gerald House, Sandra said, out of Seattle. He's expensive, very expensive. Patrice knows him. She said he specializes in exactly this kind of case. Evidence chain challenges, witness credibility attacks, procedural motions. She said he's gotten people off on less. The recordings are solid, Ryder said. Emily was careful. The locket was on her person, not obtained through any kind of illegal search. The chain of custody from the mine. I know, Sandra said. I know. But Patrice said House is going to go after the recordings on consent grounds. Washington is a two-party consent state for recordings. If Trent's team can argue that Emily had no reasonable expectation of privacy, that the recordings violated his rights, they won't get that, Ryder said. She recorded conversations she was a direct participant in. Under Washington law, a participant to a conversation can record it without the other party's consent if they have a good faith belief that the recording is necessary to document criminal activity. He stopped. He hadn't known he knew that until he said it, but he'd looked it up on his phone in the waiting room at the hospital at 2 a.m. because he'd been unable to stop his brain from working, and apparently the information had stuck. A silence. You look that up, Sandra said. I had some time. Then you should also look up the Marissa case filings, Sandra said. I have them. I've had them for 3 years. Every public document, every motion, every dismissal. I know this prosecutor's record, and I know what House did the last time they faced each other in a courtroom in this state. He won. Her voice was steady but tight. I'm not telling you this to be defeated. I'm telling you this because I'm not going to let this go to a courtroom and fall apart because somebody didn't prepare. I've waited 3 years. I will not wait any longer. What do you need from me? Ryder said. Nothing legal, she said. I have lawyers. I have the NNZBC connected, and they're sending someone up from Seattle by noon. The National Center for Victims of Crime, Ryder recognized the name. What I need from you is to make sure Emily knows that she is not standing in that courtroom alone, that there are people behind her who are not going anywhere, because the way Trent operates his attorney is going to try to dismantle her, make her doubt what she knows, make her feel small. A pause. She's already spent 14 months feeling small and doing extraordinary things anyway. She needs to know that what she did mattered, that it was enough. I'll talk to her, Ryder said. Good. Sandra's voice softened just slightly. Patrice told me something else, about the mountain, about where Marissa is. The sheriff's department is putting together a recovery team. They want to go up as soon as daylight and conditions allow. She paused. They're saying possibly today. This afternoon. Ryder closed his eyes. I want to be there, Sandra said. At the base of the mountain. I don't need to go up. I know what they're going to bring down. But I want to be there when they do. Her voice was absolutely firm. I want Marissa to come home to someone who is waiting. I'll take you, Ryder said. He said it before he'd decided to. But once it was said, it was obviously right, and he didn't take it back. When you're ready, call me. I'll take you. A silence that had something in it, not gratitude exactly, because gratitude was too small for the space between them. And then she said, thank you, and the line closed. Ortega had been watching him through the whole call with the expression of a man who knows better than to ask. Recovery team, Ryder said. They're going up today if conditions hold. I know, Ortega said. I authorized it this morning. We have the coordinates from the recording. Emily listened to it again this morning at the hospital and confirmed the landmark descriptions. The quarry shelf is a known geological feature. The search team knows exactly where it is. He paused. It's going to be a long day. Yeah, Ryder said. He stood up. One more thing, Ortega said. He reached into the file in front of him and slid a photograph across the table. It was a printout, grainy, taken from what looked like security camera footage timestamp in the corner, reading 14 months ago. A man at a hardware store buying chain. Heavy gauge chain, the kind you'd use on a container door. The man was paying cash. Ryder looked at the photograph. He looked at it for a long time. He was building it the whole time, he said. The container, the chain, the plan. He was shopping for it while Emily was recording him. While she was sending the girls to bed and pressing record and telling herself she had to stay just a little longer, gather just a little more. The hardware store is 4 miles from the cabin, Ortega said. Same chain, literally the same manufacturer. The bolt cutter cut confirmed it. That was on the container door when you opened it. The photograph was evidence. It was already logged. It was the kind of physical corroboration that tied a timeline together so tightly that no attorney, no matter how expensive or how practiced in the art of dismantling testimony, could unknit it. Chain receipt, container purchase record, 14 months of audio. A 6-year-old witness who had walked 10 miles barefoot and whose testimony delivered in the flat factual tones of a child who had simply reported what she knew was going to be the most devastating thing a jury had ever heard. Gerald House was good. He was not going to be good enough. He made one mistake, Ryder said. He was still looking at the photograph. He thought the child was asleep. He made more than one mistake, Ortega said. He underestimated all 3 of them, Emily, Lily, and Marissa, because whatever Marissa did, whatever she told people, whatever she left behind before she disappeared, it was enough to make Sandra Devlin spend 3 years keeping her case alive. Enough to make sure people were still talking about T.J. Cohen when Trent Garfield showed up in this county. He collected the photograph back into the file. He thought he was the most patient person in the room every time. He was never the most patient person in the room. Ryder left the station at 6:12 a.m. The sun was coming up over the ridge to the east, pale winter thin, the kind of light that doesn't have much warmth in it, but shows up anyway. He stood by his bike in the parking lot and let it hit his face for a moment. Bear was leaning against his truck 10 feet away. He'd waited the entire time without complaint, without text, without anything. Just waited the way Bear waited, completely, without performance. Recovery team goes up today, Ryder said. Bear nodded. Sandra wants to be at the mountain when they bring Marissa down. I'll go with you, Bear said, immediately. No hesitation. Ryder looked at him. You're not doing that alone, Bear said. Nobody does that alone. Ryder didn't argue. They drove back to the hospital at 6:30. The early morning shift had changed over, and the lobby was different, quieter, the post-dawn hush that hospitals get when the worst of the night has resolved into the steadier business of morning. Ryder went to the desk and asked about Emily Callahan. The nurse looked at her screen. She had a good night, she said. Her temperature is stable. The doctor is talking about moving her out of the acute care unit later today. She paused, checking something. Her daughter is still with her. The social worker cleared it. Can I see her? A pause. Are you family? From behind him, a small voice said, "He's Ryder." He turned. Lily was standing in the doorway to the corridor. She was wearing the two large socks in a hospital gown that was clearly sized for someone 3 times her age, and her hair was loose around her face, and she looked like she'd actually slept, which was the best thing Ryder had seen in 12 hours. She was looking at him with those dark eyes, not the terrible stillness of the night before, not the held breath quality of a child waiting to find out if the world was going to continue. Something else. Something that recognized him and had already incorporated him into whatever map she was carrying. "He's Ryder," she said again to the nurse, as if that answered the question completely. The nurse looked at Lily, then at Ryder. She smiled with the tiredness of someone on hour 11 of a 12-hour shift and said, "Room 114, keep it short." Ryder crossed to Lily. He crouched down to her level. "You're supposed to be in bed," he said. "I woke up," she said. "Mommy was sleeping. I was thirsty." She held up a small paper cup of water as evidence. "The nurse at the desk gave me this." "Good," he said. She looked at him. Just looked for a moment with that extraordinary seriousness that 6-year-olds have when they've decided something is important. "Is Trent in jail?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Is he going to stay there?" Ryder held her gaze. He thought about what he'd learned in the last 2 hours, the recordings, the hardware store receipt, the chain, the fake IDs, the defense attorney, all of it. He thought about Gerald House and Sandra Devlin's lawyers and the NCVC representative coming up from Seattle and the recovery team heading up the mountain and all the machinery of justice that was now finally fully in motion. "Yes," he said, "he's going to stay there." She processed that. Then she nodded that single considered nod he'd seen on the roadside 12 hours ago, the one that meant she'd taken the information and placed it somewhere important. "Okay," she said. She held out the paper cup. "Do you want some of my water?" Ryder looked at the cup. There was maybe half an inch of water in it. She was offering him half of everything she had. "I'm good," he said, "but thank you, Lily." She nodded again. Then she turned and padded back down the corridor in her enormous socks toward room 114. He watched her go. Behind him, he heard Bear come through the lobby doors. He heard him stop. He heard him say nothing, which was exactly right. Ryder stood up. The morning light was coming through the hospital windows, now stronger than it had been in the parking lot, cutting at an angle across the floor. Somewhere in the mountains, 4 miles east of Silver Creek Mine, a recovery team was gearing up. Somewhere in a Colville motel, Sandra Devlin was drinking bad coffee and waiting for a call. Somewhere in a county jail, Trent Garfield was meeting with an expensive attorney and beginning to understand that the architecture of 14 months of careful construction had been dismantled by a locket and a tarp and a 6-year-old girl in 2 big socks. And in room 114, Emily Callahan was sleeping. For the first time in 14 months, she was sleeping without a recording device hidden around her neck, without one ear always open, without the particular vigilance of someone who has learned that sleep is a vulnerability. She was sleeping the way you sleep when the danger is finally actually on the other side of a locked door that you are not responsible for. Ryder walked to the window. He stood in the morning light. He thought about what Ortega had said. He thought he was the most patient person in the room every time. He was never the most patient person in the room. He thought about 3 women, Marissa, Emily, Lily, each of them operating with more patience, more precision, more quiet courage than any man in the story had managed. Marissa, who had apparently left something behind that had kept her case alive for 3 years. Emily, who had spent 14 months recording the truth 1 conversation at a time. Lily, who at 6 years old had done a threat assessment, formulated a plan, executed it under conditions that would have broken most adults, and delivered it to the one stranger on a mountain road who would actually do something with it. None of them had panicked. Not one of them. Ryder stood in the light and thought about that for a long time. His phone buzzed. "Ortega, recovery team is moving. Conditions are good. ETA to quarry shelf approximately 2 hours. You'll want to bring Mrs. Devlin to the East Access Road. I'll text the coordinates. She should not be alone when they come down." He texted back, "We'll be there." He turned to Bear. "Time to go get Sandra," he said. Bear was already moving toward the door. Sandra Devlin was ready when they pulled up to the motel. She was standing outside in the cold with her coat on and her hands folded in front of her. And when Ryder's bike came around the corner, she didn't wave or move. She just watched him come the way people watch for things they've been expecting for a very long time. Bear had taken his truck. Ryder rode, Sandra rode with Bear, which Ryder had suggested without explaining. Because Bear had a quality in enclosed spaces that was different from his quality in open ones. Quieter, steadier, the kind of presence that didn't demand anything and therefore made room for everything. Some people needed that more than a motorcycle ride in January. Patrice had given Sandra the basics of what to expect from a mountain recovery. Sandra had listened, nodded, said she understood. She didn't ask for softening. She had told Patrice, apparently, that she'd been preparing for this drive for 3 years, and she didn't need anyone to make it shorter. She just needed someone to make it possible. Ryder had made it possible. The East Access Road was a county forestry road, maintained at least nominally but not built for winter traffic, and the overnight temperature had turned the mud to iron, and the iron to something that grabbed at tires like it had intentions. Bear navigated it without complaint. Ryder rode 20 yards back, watching the tree line, watching the light, pale and sharp, and doing what January light does in these mountains, which is to illuminate without warming to show you everything exactly as it is. Ortega was at the access point when they arrived. He had a county vehicle and a thermos of coffee and the expression of a man who had made peace sometime in the last few hours with the fact that today was going to be one of the days he carried for the rest of his career. He shook Sandra's hand when she got out of the truck. "Mrs. Devlin," he said, "I'm glad you're here." She looked at him directly. "How long until they come down?" "Team went up at first light," he said. "The coordinates were precise. They should reach the shelf within the hour." He paused. "When they come down, I'm going to be right here with you. You don't have to do anything or say anything. You just have to be here." "That's all I've ever wanted to do," she said quietly. "Just be here." She walked a few steps away from the group and stood facing the mountain. Not dramatically, she wasn't performing anything. She was simply orienting herself toward the thing she'd been facing for 3 years, giving it her full attention, now that she finally knew where to look. Ryder stood with Bear and Ortega, and nobody spoke, and that was right. His phone buzzed at 8:41 a.m. It was Decker texting from the county impound lot where Trent's truck had been taken for processing. They found something in the wheel well, small waterproof box zip-tied to the frame. Cash looks like around $18,000. And another ID set. Different from the ones in the cabin, different name, different state. Ryder read it twice, then he showed it to Ortega without a word. Ortega read it. His jaw tightened by approximately 2 millimeters, which on Ortega's face was the equivalent of another man slamming his fist on a table. "He had a go bag in the truck," Ortega said. "Cash and I in the wheel binati. He could have walked out of the cabin, gotten in the truck, and been across the state line in 6 hours as someone else entirely. Except he didn't think he needed to run yet," Ryder said. "He thought the plan worked. He went home and watched television." "Because he forgot about the tarp," Bear said. That sentence landed in the cold air and stayed there. Ortega forwarded the text to his sergeant with 2 words appended, "Book it." He pocketed his phone. "Gerald House is going to have a very bad morning when he hears about this," he said. "Flight risk evidence on top of everything else. Bail was already denied, but this locks that door from the other side." Ryder nodded. He looked up at the mountain. He thought about all the versions of this morning that hadn't happened. The version where Emily didn't hide the locket, where the recordings were lost, where Trent's story held long enough for him to use the truck and the cash and the new identity and disappear into whatever state had the worst coordination with Washington's law enforcement. The version where Lily slept through it. The version where nobody drove down Route 9 at 4:20 in the afternoon. He thought about how thin it all was. How many moments had to go exactly right for this morning to exist? One tarp, one insomniac child, one rough-running engine that needed a rest stop, one decision to pull over instead of push through. He had not planned to stop. He had not planned on any of it. At 9:17 a.m. Ortega's radio crackled. The recovery team leader's voice came through flat and professional, with the particular cadence of people who deal in difficult truths regularly and have learned to deliver them without ceremony, because ceremony makes it worse, not better. "We have her. Beginning descent. ETA to Access Road, 40 minutes. Ortega looked at Sandra. She had her back to them. She was still facing the mountain, but her shoulders had moved, not collapsed, not shaken, but moved, the way something moves when a long-held tension releases all at once, like a door finally swinging open after years of pressure against it. Ryder walked to her. He didn't say anything. He just stood beside her, close enough that she could feel he was there. She reached out without looking and found his arm. She held it the way Lily had held his flannel shirt on Route 9, not clutching, not desperate, just making contact, confirming presence. You're real, yes, I'm real. She's coming home, Sandra said. Her voice was absolutely even. Yes, Ryder said. I used to talk to her, Sandra said. Every night before I went to sleep. I'd tell her where I was in the search, what I'd found, what I hadn't found. I'd tell her I was still looking. She paused. Last night I told her someone had finally found what she'd left behind, that her voice was going to be heard. Another pause. I think she knew. I think wherever she's been, she knew it was going to happen. Ryder didn't answer that, not because he disagreed, but because some things don't require a response, they require a witness. He stood beside Sandra Devlin on a frozen access road in eastern Washington, and he witnessed it. The 40 minutes passed. When the recovery team came down the mountain, Sandra didn't cry. She stood straight and she watched them come, and she held Ryder's arm and she did not look away. Ortega moved to meet the team leader. There were words exchanged in low voices that Ryder couldn't hear and didn't try to. Then Ortega came back to Sandra. He said very quietly, she's been formally identified. We'll need to make it official through the medical examiner, but the team leader is certain. She's been found. Sandra closed her eyes, just for a moment. Then she opened them. Tell them thank you, she said. Please tell the team thank you. I will, Ortega said. She stood there another moment. Then she turned to Ryder and looked at him with eyes that were still dry and still clear and completely irreversibly changed the eyes of a woman who has walked out of a very long dark and is still adjusting to the light. I need to call her father, she said. We've been divorced for 20 years. We haven't spoken well in 15. But he needs to know. She paused. She was his daughter too. Of course, Ryder said. Can you... She stopped, started again. Can you give me a few minutes? Take whatever you need, he said. She stepped away, pulling out her phone. Bear appeared at Ryder's shoulder. He handed Ryder a cup of coffee from the thermos. He'd apparently been holding it for the right moment, which was a very Bear thing to do. It's done, Bear said. Most of it, Ryder said. The rest is courts and lawyers and time, Bear said. That's not ours. No, Ryder agreed. It's not. His phone rang. He looked at it. The hospital. He picked up fast. This is Ryder. Mr. Ryder, this is Dr. Anand at Colville General. I'm calling about Emily Callahan. A pause, and in that pause, Ryder's entire body went rigid because pauses from doctors meant things and not always the right things. She's been asking for you this morning. She's doing considerably better. We're moving her to a standard room this afternoon. We wanted to let you know, and also she said she has something she wants to give you. She was quite clear about it. She said you'd know what it was. Ryder exhaled. I'll be there in an hour, he said. When he walked into the hospital for the second time that morning, the lobby was fully awake. Daytime staff visitors, the ordinary business of healing, running alongside the extraordinary weight of what had happened in this building overnight. He went to the new room number the desk gave him and knocked. Come in, Emily said. She was sitting up fully, real sitting, not propped against pillows, but upright with her hands in her lap and her hair brushed, which seemed like a small thing and was not a small thing at all. Lily was on the bed beside her, cross-legged, working on what appeared to be a drawing with a set of markers that someone had brought. She looked up when Ryder came in and gave him the nod, and went back to her drawing. Emily looked at him the way she'd looked at him the night before, but without the fragility. What was left with the fragility stripped away was something harder and cleaner, a quality he recognized from the best people he'd known over 53 years, the quality of someone who has been tested to the exact outermost edge of what they could carry and has discovered to their own surprise that the edge was further than they thought. You came back, she said. You said that you had something for me. I do. She reached to the bedside table. She picked up a small object and held it out to him. It was the locket. He looked at it. Emily, this is evidence. The sheriff's department, they made copies of everything on it, she said. Digital copies, chain of custody, documented everything, processed correctly through Ortega. The physical locket has been released back to me because the recordings have been transferred. She paused. It's mine, and I want you to have it. Ryder didn't move. I can't take that. You can, she said. I can't wear it anymore. I need to not wear it anymore. Every time I look at it, I'm going to remember why I made it, and I don't want the thing that saved my life to be the thing that keeps me in that house in my head, you understand? Her voice was steady and direct. But I don't want to throw it away. It matters. What's in it matters. What Marissa left behind, what I recorded, what Lily did, it all matters, and this is the object that held all of it. She extended her hand further. You're the one who finished it, so it belongs with you. Ryder looked at the locket in her palm for a long moment. Then he picked it up. It was lighter than he expected. The chain pooled in his hand like water. He closed his fingers around it. Thank you, he said. No, Emily said firmly. Thank you. Lily looked up from her drawing. She held it out toward him, a piece of paper with markers on it, figures drawn with the confident imprecision of a 6-year-old who is drawing what she knows, not what she can technically render. 3 figures, one very large with what appeared to be a beard, one medium-sized with dark hair, one small with bare feet that had been carefully colored red at the bottom. Underneath, in the large, deliberate letters of a child who has recently learned to write her name, it said, Ryder Emily Lily. He took it. He looked at it for a long moment. He folded it carefully and put it in the same pocket as the locket. It's very good, he said. I know, Lily said, and went back to her next drawing. The corner of Emily's mouth did the thing again. The thing that was almost a smile, that had the complete architecture of a smile without committing fully, and which Ryder suspected would become a real smile somewhere in the next few weeks, when she had practiced it enough in conditions that were safe. Patrice is coming this afternoon, Emily said. She's found a transitional housing program in Spokane, 2-bedroom. They have a school Lily can go to. She paused. It's not much. It's a start, Ryder said. It's a start, she agreed. And the chapters, Fun Bear talked to me this morning. You didn't have to do that. Bear decided, Ryder said. Bear decides things. Well, she looked at her hands. The frostbite had left them red and slightly swollen still, but the damage was moderate. They would heal. Tell Bear I said thank you, and tell him Lily wants to see one of the motorcycles up close. She told me this morning. She said the man with the beard has a truck, but the big man with the beard has a motorcycle, and she wants to know how fast it goes. Ryder looked at Lily. Lily was drawing, but her ears were clearly operational because she said without looking up, I want to know how fast. It goes fast enough, Ryder said. How fast is that? Fast enough to get somewhere important when it matters. She considered that answer with the seriousness it deserved. Then, okay. He left the hospital at 10:52 a.m. He stood in the parking lot with the locket in one hand and Lily's drawing folded in his shirt pocket and the January sun hitting the side of his face. Bear was waiting by the truck. He'd stayed because Bear always stayed. How is she? Bear asked. She's going to be fine, Ryder said. He said it the way he'd said yes to Lily on the roadside the night before, not as comfort, not as hope, but as fact. Because it was. And you? Bear asked. Ryder thought about the question honestly, the way Bear's questions always required. I'm good, he said. I'm tired and I need a hot shower and my bike still needs that engine adjustment and I haven't eaten anything real in about 14 hours. He paused. But I'm good. Tilly's, Bear said. Actual food this time, not just biscuits. Copy that. He got on the bike. He held the locket for one more moment before he put it in his inside jacket pocket, the pocket closest to his chest where he carried the things that mattered. He could feel the slight weight of it, even through the leather. Small, lighter than everything it had carried. He thought about what Emily had said, I need to not wear it anymore. He understood that. The thing that saves you can also anchor you to the moment you needed saving, and there comes a point where you have to choose between carrying the evidence of what you survived and actually doing the surviving. Emily had made that choice this morning, sitting upright in a hospital bed with her daughter beside her, drawing pictures with too many markers. She had chosen to survive. He thought about Marissa Devlin coming down the mountain this morning, found after 3 years returning to a mother who had never stopped looking. He thought about what Sandra had said. I want Marissa to come home to someone who is waiting. Someone had been waiting. Someone had always been waiting. And now the waiting was over, and the real grief could begin, which was different from the waiting grief, heavier in some ways and lighter in others, because grief that knows its shape is grief that can be moved through. He thought about Trent Garfield sitting in county lockup, while Gerald House built a strategy around recordings and chain of custody and two-party consent law, and he thought about the hardware store receipt and the fake IDs and the $18,000 in the wheel well of a truck that was now in an impound lot, and he thought, not this time. He thought about all the miles between 4:20 p.m. yesterday and 10:52 a.m. today. He thought about the engine running rough, the pullover he hadn't planned, the headlight catching something small and pale on the shoulder of a mountain road. He started the bike. The engine turned over clean smoother than it had run yesterday, as if the night had fixed something he hadn't known to fix. He idled for a moment, listening to it. Even. Steady. Right. He pulled out of the hospital lot. 3 weeks later, the trial date was set. Not Trent's first appearance, not the arraignment, the actual trial date scheduled for 9 months out, which was fast by Washington standards, and which the prosecutor's office attributed to the strength of the evidence, the number of charges, and the public attention that had accumulated around the case once the story broke. It broke hard. A 6-year-old girl barefoot in the snow, finding help in the form of a Hell's Angel on a mountain road. The image had traveled the way certain images travel, crossing every demographic and geography, because it contained something fundamental about courage that people recognized without needing to be told. Lily's name was kept out of the press. Emily's name was kept out as long as legally possible. But the shape of the story moved town to town, state to state, the way Ryder had once told Sandra he hoped it would. He didn't see Sandra again until the day she called him from Spokane 4 months after the mountain. She said she'd been working with a victims advocacy group. Patrice had connected her, and she said she wanted him to know that Marissa had been buried in a churchyard in Spokane, in the plot Sandra had kept reserved for 3 years, and that there had been a service, and that it had been attended by more people than she'd expected, including the prosecutor's office and 2 detectives from the original investigation who had driven up from Spokane without being asked. "How are you, Ryder asked her. "Different," she said. "Not better yet, not worse, different." A pause. "It's the right kind of different." He understood that. Emily called him on a Tuesday in April. She'd moved into the Spokane apartment. Lily had started school and had made a friend named Cora, and had informed her teacher on the first day that she had once walked 10 miles in the snow, and so she was not afraid of the playground. The teacher had apparently found this both alarming and entirely credible. "She told me something last night," Emily said. "At bedtime, she said she wasn't scared anymore." "Good," Ryder said. "She said she was scared when she was walking on the road. She said she was very scared, but she did it anyway because she said you don't wait to not be scared. You just walk." Emily's voice was quiet and full at the same time. "I don't know where she got that." "She got it from you," Ryder said. A silence. "Maybe," Emily said. "Or maybe she just got it from being 6 years old and knowing what she knew and deciding that her mother was worth 10 miles in the snow." Another pause. "I think about that a lot. What that decision looked like from the inside of a 6-year-old. What she weighed against what." "She weighed you," Ryder said, "and you were worth it." The trial began in October. It ran for 3 weeks. The recordings were admitted in full. The consent challenge was rejected in a pretrial ruling that cited Washington's statute precisely, which Ryder found satisfying in a way that was not about vindication, but about accuracy. Accuracy mattered. The truth of what had happened, stated plainly and on the record, mattered. Emily testified for 2 days. She sat in the witness box and she answered questions for 6 hours on the first day and 4 hours on the second, and by the accounts of everyone in that courtroom, she never wavered. Not once. Not when Gerald House suggested her memory was unreliable. Not when he implied her motives for recording were manipulative. Not when he put on a performance of skepticism so elaborate it bordered on theater. She answered every question with the same quality she'd had in room 114. Clear-eyed, precise, steady, and completely unmovably present. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. They came back with guilty on all counts. 2 counts of first-degree attempted murder. 1 count of first-degree murder for Marissa. Kidnapping, false imprisonment, evidence tampering. The list ran 7 items long, and each item was read aloud in a courtroom that Ryder was not in. He was in Colville in his shop with a 2003 Harley-Davidson Road King up on the lift and a socket wrench in his hand when Bear called to tell him. All counts, Bear said. Ryder set down the wrench. He asked. Life plus 40, Bear said. No possibility of parole. Ryder stood in the shop for a moment with the phone in his hand and the smell of motor oil around him and the ordinary sounds of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon coming through the open bay door. Good, he said. He picked up the wrench. He went back to work. That evening, after he had locked the shop and cleaned his hands and was sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone slightly cold, he reached into his jacket pocket and took out the locket. He set it on the table in front of him. He looked at it for a long time. He thought about a road in January, a headlight, a small pale shape on the shoulder. He thought about the moment he'd cut the engine and stepped off the bike and moved toward that shape, not knowing what he was moving toward, not knowing what the night was going to ask of him. Just moving because something small was in trouble and he was there, and that was enough of a reason. He thought about what Lily had told Emily on a Tuesday night in April at bedtime. You don't wait to not be scared. You just walk. He picked up the locket. He held it in his closed hand. A 6-year-old girl had walked 10 miles barefoot in the snow and changed the shape of everything, not because she was extraordinary, though she was, but because she had looked at an impossible choice in an impossible dark and decided her mother was worth every step of it. That was the whole story when you pulled it down to its bones. Not the mind, not the container, not the arrest or the trial or the recordings or the verdict. The whole story was a child deciding that love was a reason to keep moving and then moving one cracked and bleeding foot in front of the other until she found the light. Ryder set the locket back on the table. He picked up his coffee. He looked out the window at the dark. Some nights you stop on a mountain road and the road changes and you go forward carrying something you weren't carrying before. Some nights a 6-year-old girl asks if you're real and you say yes, and the yes is the most important thing you've ever said. He had stopped. He had listened. He had believed her. And that had been enough. That had been, in the end, the whole of it enough.